In the introductory lecture on summer apple diseases, you learned that summer apple diseases include fruit rots and fruit blemishes. In this lecture, we will discuss the fruit rot diseases. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to identify the pathogens that cause bitter rot, black rot, and white rot, compare and contrast the signs and symptoms and infection periods of bitter rot, black rot, and white rot, and lastly, describe the disease cycles of black and white rot. Bitter rot is probably the most recognizable fruit rot of apple. It is caused by species of Colototricum in the Colototricum gliosporiores and Colototricum acutatum complexes. We have identified 2 species in Ohio orchards, both of which belong to the Colototricum gliosporiores complex. Preliminary surveys of diseased apples suggest that Colototricum siamense is the most common species in Ohio. The sexual stage of Colototricum gliosporiores is Glomerella cingulata, and can also cause fruit rot, but most often is associated with a leaf spot disease on apple. Colototricum has a wide host range and is arguably one of the most destructive diseases of fruit and nuts. Here you can see the destructive nature of Colototricum on strawberry, blueberry, almond, chestnut, grapes, and olives. On soft fruit, Colototricum usually causes sunken lesions that sporulate profusely during warm and humid conditions. On nuts, the rot is internal, but causes discoloration on the shell, as you can see with the chestnut image here. You have the internal rot, and on the outside, there would be discoloration. On apple, bitter rot is predominant on the fruit, but the sexual stage of Colototricum gliosporiores, the Glomerella cingulata, can cause leaf spots, as shown here on the right. So you can see the leaf spots on the upper surface of the leaf and on the lower surface of the leaf. Leaf spotting does not have a negative impact on yield, and the symptoms are often confused with chemical or sunburn. Glomerella cingulata can also cause stem cankers, although these are rare. Spots can expand and cover the entire fruit very quickly, especially when conditions are hot and humid. In addition, more than one lesion can form on a single fruit, and symptoms on the fruit manifest initially as sunken circular lesions, as can be seen here, with concentric rings. When you cut the fruit open, you can see a V-shaped lesion as shown here. However, this lesion does not extend fully to the core. The internal rot is a dry rot with a spongy consistency. In the field, this internal V-shaped lesion is a diagnostic feature of bitter rot. So this is the disease cycle for bitter rot. Bitter rot is a polycyclic disease, which, if you recall from general plant pathology, means that the pathogen is capable of several infection cycles in a season. This figure shows the general life cycle of Colototricum. The overwintering structures on apple are perithecia or acervuli, as I state down here. However, some species of Colototricum can produce sclerotia and overwinter as mycelium. Colototricum produces 2 types of spores that can cause a primary infection. Ascospores are the sexual spores and are produced in perithecia, as shown here. So this is a single perithecium, and you can see the asci with the ascospores inside. The ascospores are forcibly ejected during breeding periods, and there is only one generation of ascospores per season. Conidia are the asexual spores and are produced in acervuli, as is depicted here in the center of the disease cycle. And this is a single acervulus. Multiple generations of Conidia are produced during a season, and the spores are dispersed by splashing rain, insects, and birds. Conditions that favor disease development in the field are high humidity, so around 80 to 100%, and high temperatures, anywhere from 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Once a spore lands on the plant tissue, it can bust through the cuticle and epidermal cells, initiating an infection, which is shown here. So the Conidia land, or in this case, the ascospore lands on the surface of the fruit. It germinates, it produces an aposporium, and then busts through both the cuticle and epidermal cells. If conditions are favorable, the fungus grows within the tissue and causes disease symptoms. In the northeastern and midwestern US, this occurs in July and August, depending on the variety. Colotarchicum agutatum and Colotarchicum gliosporiores can also enter a latent period or a quiescent period. In this case, the pathogen remains dormant and no symptoms develop. And the transition from the latent phase to the disease development phase is not well understood, but physiological changes during ripening and storage are thought to trigger disease development, resulting in post-harvest storage rot. Colotarchicum agutatum and gliosporiores overwinter as acervuli or perithecia on mummified fruit or dead wood from the previous season. In the images seen here, there are numerous mummies that can be seen on a dormant honeycrisp tree. So all of these structures are what we call the mummies. A close-up of a mummy, which I'm showing on the right, shows that the mummies have a large surface area and can support thousands of perithecia. We will cover management in more detail in the third lecture of this module, but removal of these mummies is critical to preventing new infections the following season. The next two rots that we will discuss are black rot and white rot. Both diseases are caused by Botchiosphaeria. Black rot is caused by Botchiosphaeria obtusa and is a vigorous saprophyte on many other hosts. On apple, 3 different diseases can occur depending on the tissue that is infected. Losses from fruit rot and defoliation resulting from leaf spot can be considerable, especially in warm, humid areas of southern and central Ohio. In northern regions, entire trees can be killed from trunk and limb cankers, especially following a hard winter. Fruit rot usually appears at the calyx end of the fruit, as shown up here in the top image, but it can affect wherever there is a wound, including wounds from insect injuries or mechanical injury from pruning or hail. There is usually 1 spot per fruit, a characteristic that distinguishes black rot from bitter rot. However, multiple wounds on a fruit can result in multiple lesions, as shown in the bottom image here. So there's a large lesion here, and then you can see that there are several other lesions on the fruit. On leaves, the spots are circular with a black margin and white center, resembling a frog's eye, hence the name frog eye leaf spot. You can see that these symptoms are similar to Glomerella cingulata, which is the bitter rot fungus on leaves. However, with frog eye leaf spot, you get these characteristic lesions that have the dark black margin and white center. Pycnidia form in the centers of these leaf spots. Canker appears as irregular shaped lesions that are slightly sunken, as I'm showing in the third image here. Pycnidia form on dead wood of the cankered areas. The cankers are hard to distinguish from other fungal tree cankers, winter injury, and sunburn. As I mentioned, both black rot and white rot are caused by Botrosphaeria, but they're caused by different species. White rot is caused by the species Dothidia. White rot is also referred to as bot rot. Botrosphaeria Dothidia causes a fruit rot and a canker disease. And for a long time, the canker disease was considered the most common disease in northern Ohio, however, or in northeastern Ohio. However, with more frequent rain events and warming changes during the summer months, fruit rot incidence is increasing throughout Ohio. Canker lesions can be hard to spot at first. They appear as darkened areas on the bark, as shown in this young honeycrisp tree here on the left. So you can see this dark area on the trunk, which is the canker. On older trees, the lesions darken and the dark area becomes flaky and can be easily sloughed off. So you can see on an older tree that the lesion is darker, and you can see here on the right where the bark is starting to slough off over that dark lesion. When you cut through the bark tissue, you can see a very distinct margin between the diseased tissue and the healthy tissue, as I'm pointing out here with the arrow. Drought stress and winter injury have been associated with an increase in infection and canker expansion. There appears to be a correlation between fire blight injury and white rot cankers, although the variables associated with this correlation have not been deciphered. Botrosphaeria Dothidia requires a wound to infect and develops into large, soft spots on the fruit. The color of the spots vary depending on the variety. On green and yellow varieties, a red halo is often observed, whereas on red-colored fruit, no halo or a blackish-colored halo is formed. White rot is a soft rot, and during the hot summer months, the apples turn into a smelly sack of rotting tissue. In contrast to bitter rot, when you cut through the fruit, there is a V-shaped lesion that extends to the core of the tissue. This tissue within this lesion is soft and mushy, and it resembles applesauce. There's also a strong sour smell associated with white rot that is not present with bitter or black rot. So you can see in this image that this lesion extends to the center of the core, whereas on the right side with bitter rot, it does not extend to the core. This is a soft rot, so if you push on it, it's squishy and will have a consistency of applesauce, where with bitter rot, if you squish on it, it's spongy and more firm in nature. So black rot and white rot have a similar disease cycle. The cycle shown here is for black rot, so it includes a foliar infection. However, white rot does not have that foliar infection phase. Both diseases are polycyclic diseases. The primary inocula are Conidia and ascospores. The Conidia are produced in Pycnidia and the ascospores in Perithecia. The Parathecia forcibly discharge the ascospores during spring rains, while the conidia produced within the pycnidia ooze out in tremendous numbers and are washed and rain splashed to other parts of the tree. The heaviest discharge of spores occurs around blossom time, but the production of conidia may continue during wet periods throughout the summer. Therefore, white rot and black rot tend to be more predominant during wet summers. The spores overwinter in pycnidia or parathecia on mummified fruit, dead wood, and also fallen leaves for black rot. The temperature for spore release varies slightly between white rot and black rot. For black rot, it's between 68 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and you need about 9 hours of wetness. For white rot, the temperature is 80 to 90 degrees, so it's warmer, and you need 5 hours of wetness for it to occur. So this is a summary table that compares and contrasts the three rots, and an important table for you to remember. The second lecture for the summer fruit rot disease module will focus on fruit blemishes, specifically sooty blotch and fly speck.